All right, so obviously we can write our own value returning functions. We've already written these other functions, right? We've written our own different little sub functions and functions before, so obviously we can probably, that are void, we could probably also write functions that are value returning, okay? So to write a value returning function, you write a simple function and add one or more return statements. Now, they say one or more return statements, they say that, but I, as your instructor, insist that you only use one return statement. Only use one return statement. Now, the reason why we do this is if you have multiple return statements, you have multiple exit points from your function, which is always a security flaw. So a number of zero-day exploits and a number of software vulnerabilities arise from multiple entries and exits into functions. Okay, so I always want to see you use only one return statement. Only one return statement. So as I'm teaching you how to write these, I'm going to show you, you set a variable and then you return the variable. Okay, you don't actually just return directly from an if-else statement or anything like that. Okay, and the way that you do it is it's just like the functions that we were writing, but you add return something, right? So the value for expression is going to be returned to the part of the program that actually called it. So, and again, it can be complex, it can be a string, it can be concatenation, it can be a sum, it can be all kinds of different stuff. All right, so again, here's a sum function. I'm going to have us write like a mean function or something like that. And maybe we'll do a product function or something. So here's the function that we have. So obviously we use def keyword. We use sum as the name, so we know, hey, this thing's going to make a sum. We have num1, num2 as our parameters that are going to be taking values as they're coming in. We make the result as num1 plus num2. Obviously, that's going to be num1 plus num2. And then we return that result. Now, if we want to make this even shorter, we can actually just return num1 plus num2. We don't even have to store that. It'll make it a little bit more efficient. So let's go ahead and emulate that, okay? So coming down here, we can make our def, and let's do product. Okay, so we're going to product and we're going to have our number 1 and then we're going to have our number 2 coming in. Okay, so this is, I want you to, what is this line called? Give you a second. This is the function header. Okay, so now we're going to write the body. Okay, so I can actually say prod equals num1 times num2. And then I'm going to use the return statement, return prod. Okay, so that is how you can actually use that product or set up that product function. Now, if I actually want to make that product happen, I can say, let's get P1 is product of 2 and 4, right? I can say P2 is the product of, P1 and 8. Okay, and then I can obviously, print P1 and P2. Okay, so I've used the product, I'm calling into it, and then I'm accepting values out of it. Now you'll notice the primary difference here. So we've talked about the arguments. So I'm sending arguments in, they're positional. Okay, so 2 is going to go into num1, 4 is going to go into num2. Okay, so then num1 times num2 is going to happen, and then we're going to use the assignment operator to put the value into prod. Okay, so that value, so 2 times 4 is 8. Okay, so we're going to have 8 in prod, and then we're going to return the value in prod. Okay, so this return is going to kick that 8 back, and then we have this assignment operator. So this whole thing right here is going to turn into 8, or the value of prod, and then that value is going to be saved into P1. Okay, so 2 times 4 is 8, so we should have 8 here. Okay, so then we have the same thing here. So P1 is now 8. Okay, so 8 comes into num1, and this magic number 8 comes into num2. We get 8 times 8, 64. So then prod has 64. So then 64 is returned back to this, and then we use the assignment operator to say, hey, put that 64 into P2. Okay, so 2 times 4 is 8. 8 times 8, 64. We should see 8 and 64 when I run this. There we go. There is 8 and 64. Okay, now I need you to understand this. Just because I have a return doesn't mean I'm catching it with anything. And what I mean, because you're going to hear me say it all the time, catch the output. What I mean by catching the output is you can imagine this lobbing a softball back at the main method. okay? If I don't have this P1 equals, the assignment operator in a variable, it's going to lob the softball and no one's going to catch it. It's just going to hit the ground and it's going to be pointless, okay? So what ends up happening is this is working, okay? This is functioning. Oh, and actually I got to get rid of this because I got rid of those. And this. So this is working. There's nothing wrong with this. But the issue is it's returning a value, but we're not doing anything with that value. We need to assign that to something. Okay, so what happens is I call this, and then it returns it back, and then I assign that value into P1. And then here I assign that value into P2. So that is catching the output. So P1 catches the output of product. P2 catches the output of the product of 8 times 8. P1 catches the output of the product of 2 times 4. Okay? So make sure you have that flow in your mind figured out. I call here, so I'm throwing 2 and 4 into this function, and then I multiply 2 times 4 and I get 8, and then I return the value of prod, which is 8, back, and so this equals 8 now. So then I can say 8, using the assignment operator, push 8 into P1. So now P1 equals 8. Okay, so go over that several times. Make sure you really have that through your head because you're going to need to catch those, bringing them back out. Okay, so that's how we sort of write our own value returning functions. And then obviously how to use them. You can have a function for user input or whatever, but you got to make sure that you catch that value, right? That's the most important thing, is that you have the return statement and that you catch it with an assignment operator. Otherwise, you can't do anything with it, okay? So that's how you're going to use those value returning functions. All right, so in terms of IPO, we have input, processing, output. We have these things called IPO charts. We're really not going to cover it. I'm not really concerned about that. So obviously, we figured out how to do a number or a value returning function. So this right here always returns a value. It returns the product of a or num1 times num2. Sometimes you need to actually return strings. So you can write functions that also return strings. For example, name equals enter your name, and then you actually return the name. It's the same thing, right? So we could say, we can call this get, first name. Or we can actually just say get text input. Okay, now I said get text input because I can have here some variable called prompt. Okay, now prompt is going to have something pushed into it. Okay, so then what I can do is I can say value equals input, which is the function, input, which is of the standard library, and then I'm going to throw the prompt in there, and the prompt is variable, so it'll say something, and then I can return that value right there. Okay, now I have a totally flexible get text input now. So up here, what I can do is I can say first name equals get text input, and then I can say enter first name. Okay, so it's going to send that in there, and I can say a last name. Now again, this is more complicated than just using the input to start with, but I'll show you why this could be useful. So get text input, and I can say enter last name. Okay, so what's happening is I say I'm going to go to the get text input. I'm going to give it the argument enter first name. Okay, so prompt is enter first name. So then it says input enter first name and return what the user enters into the keyboard in this value, and then return that. Okay, so then that comes back to what the user entered, and then we use the assignment operator to save that user input into first name and last name. Okay, so if I run that, then let's go ahead and print it. Now it'll just print out my first and last name, right? So I can say Adam Spanier. There you go, prints out Adam Spanier. Now again, this is more complicated than just using input, but what you can do is you can say test this for input validation. Right? You can test to make sure it's yes. You can test to make sure it's no. You can test to make sure it's all lowercase. You can test to make sure the length of it is less than 5. You can do all kinds of cool stuff inside of this get text input besides just use the input function. Okay? So a lot of times this is what we're going to be doing. Like def get name, you're going to get the name, and then you're going to return the name. So again, you can do the same thing with Boolean values. So a Boolean function, you can return either true or false And it's the same thing, right? So you can say def get name valid or something like that, right? And then I can throw a name in, and then I can say we're just going to basically make sure the name has a length of 5. Okay, so we're going to check for a length of 5. So why don't we do this? Let's go check name length. There we go. So check name length. So we're going to check the name of the length. We're going to make sure it's greater than 5. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the length of the name, and we use a function called len to do that. Okay, so, and that's a standard library function, so that's going to give me I don't know what that glitch was. It's going to give me the length of it. So I can actually set a Boolean function as well, so I can say good, right? To start with, I'm going to assume it's not good, so I'm going to set that to false with a capital F. Okay, so then I can say if length is greater than 5, then I can set good to true. Just to be sure, I can also just make sure good is false, or good equals false. Okay, and then I can return good. Now you'll notice I set good as false because I want to make sure that I don't accidentally assume that the name is good, right? So I set it to false. I check that length, and then if the length is greater than 5, I set good to true. But you also notice I don't just assume that this false worked out. I assume that this false didn't work out, so I also use the else, set good to false, and then return that good. So you'll notice I only use one return. I could have said return true and return false here. I could have just done it like this. Okay, but like I mentioned, 2 exit points. We never, ever, ever want to do that. So instead, we're going to just set a variable with the value that we want and then return that variable. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and check the name length. So let's go ahead and print check name length, and we're going to check Adam. Okay, so we should get a false, right? So, oh, and I could have actually just put that in there. And it's a false, right? So why don't we actually just throw in first name? Okay, so let's run it again. Adam Spanier. So we have a false. So let's go ahead and also check last name. Might as well while we're at it. There we go. And I should enter Adam, and then I should enter Spanier. And lo and behold, we have false and true. Okay, so that Boolean is doing what it's supposed to be doing in checking that length. Now, we don't like magic numbers, right? So it might be really good if I actually create a variable, right? Name length is 5. Okay, so this is a global constant, and I can come down here and I can replace this with name length. All right, that way it makes sure that I get to this point. I say, okay, if length is greater than name length, then it's good. Otherwise, whatever. And actually, we should probably name that minimum name, or min name length. Okay, so that we know that's a minimum. All right, and we could actually do some math here. We could go and length is less than max name length. Right, so I can actually set a max name length as well. And we'll set that to 15, okay, to make sure it's within that range, okay, because we're using that as a logical operator. So I can come in here and I can say, oh, we hit the debugger instead here. Let's go ahead and start that again. There we go. Adam Spanier. Everything's good, right? So let's enter a really long name. Adam. Oh, then we got a false because it was too long. Okay, so it's actually making sure the name's not too long, making sure the name's not too short, and then we actually get that Boolean variable out of there. All right, so we're going to try to finish this out. And then returning multiple values. Let's go ahead and just cover this real quick. I can also return multiple values if I want to, just to demonstrate it to you. I can also return name, right? So I just hit a comma, and then I add the extra value, and then when I catch it, I can actually catch it in 2 variables. So here it's actually going to print it, right? So it prints it as a set. So it says false Adam, false blah, blah, blah. So I have those two sets, or I can catch it in two variables. So I can do bool and name. Oops. Boolean name equals check name length, and we can do last name. Okay, so I can actually save those two things, and then I can go ahead and print Boolean and name. And you can actually see that I returned two values. I returned Boolean here, and then I returned name here, and then I have those in the main method now. Okay, so there we go. True and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that is how you can actually return multiple values, and you're going to see me doing that quite a bit. It's really, really useful. All right, so we're going to take a little break and come back on the other side. Hopefully we can get this finished up here pretty quick.